as a gluten-free blogger, people come to me for the newest, latest, greatest research. And although I feel like I'm getting a lot of education from my own hospital that I go to, which is the Mayo Clinic, which is huge in America, and, really, really educated doctors when it comes to celiac, I still feel like when it comes down to like the actual science of it and busting myths and dealing with all these issues that are still coming up in the news every day because we're constantly learning about celiac and gluten sensitivity, I feel like that's really the next step in my journey, is to get to know the actual like hefty research that's behind it and to help bust myths so my journey, as a blogger can only get better by giving my readers the best, most effective research, I guess, because there's so many people that make being gluten-free so scary.
And what was the standout session for you then? What was it that you, when you were on the plane and you were just going through your notes and the handouts and the lineup, as you came into land, you were thinking, you know what, that's the session I cannot miss. That's the one I've got to get up early for, or that's the one I've got to get in the front row for?
I didn't get in the front row because there was a blogging table in the back, but I knew for sure that the debunking myths session with Dr. Guandolini and Dr. Fasano was going to be a huge one. And it was pretty much the one, along with Dr. Fasano's is 20 parts per million safe for us. Those were the two ones that were huge for me. And I think that those were the most validating, I guess, for why I attended, and because it's the ones that I could spread the most research back to my readers.
And you know what? I was speaking with one of your colleagues, Amy Legere, earlier on, and she said that was the standout session for her as well. So obviously there was an awful lot of people that really wanted to debunk those kind of myths, which can very easily drag down us celiacs, can't they?
Right.
I mean, you probably knew a lot of them anyway, but what were the ones that made you go, well, I didn't know that. That's the latest, is it? Gosh, I might as well stop doing that then.
Right. And I think that why the myth session was so important to us bloggers is we get so many questions being this figurehead in a gluten-free community, right? So if you just get diagnosed and you hear something from your sister, oh, my sister's best friend's daughter-in-law had celiac and she couldn't do X, Y, Z. And then you're like, is that right? Most people don't get a chance to talk to their doctors on a regular basis. Hell, most people don't have a doctor that actually understands celiac. So, they come to us. They come to people like Amy. They come to people like me. They come to people like Rebecca for Pretty Little Celiac and Kelly from Celiac Chicks, the people who are there, and Laura from G3 Laura. We are the people that people ask these myths to. So I think for us, that's clearly the most important one because those are the questions we constantly get asked. For me, it's a lot about the proper diagnosis, and this wasn't necessarily in the myth section, but they did touch on it. It's really about blood tests are not just it. If you have a blood test and you're positive, that's great. Or for me, I had a borderline blood test, so I had to go through all of the steps. The biopsies, getting the right amount of samples during the biopsy. Some people, and actually some gastros admitted there that they only take 2 samples, but now they're saying it's 5 to 6 samples, so you can actually get a proper diagnosed biopsy. And then doing the genetic tests as well to know if you're even predisposed to the celiac condition with your genes. So, some people are just like, oh yeah, I had the blood test and it was negative. I'm like, oh my gosh, you didn't do the right steps, so it's consistently reminding people that there's steps to this diagnosis and to not self-diagnose and to not just rely on one test, that there's actually several tests for it. And I think another one that was huge, we get a lot of people who are spreading the myth of cross-reactivity. There's a couple websites that are super huge on it, and it scares the crap out of a lot of celiacs. They're like, I heard that corn, you can't have corn because it has gluten in it. Corn does have gluten in it, but it's not the type of gluten that we react to. Corn is a protein. Same with coffee. I consistently get the coffee question, like, how can you drink coffee? Doesn't it make you sick? And, for that, it could be several things. Flavored coffee has added flavor to it. So, like a celiac, you take a second look at that natural flavor aspect. But it's this idea that gluten is gluten, the way that we know it, wheat, rye, barley. And don't tell me that I can't have corn. Don't tell me that I can't have coffee. And don't scare everyone by perpetuating this myth. People love to blame something. It's not the fact that you're not getting out and exercising, and not really taking a look at your diet for salt, sugar, fat. You're just, hey, I'm going to blame wheat for the fact that I'm morbidly obese or chronically overweight, whatever. And they think that this one thing is going to be it. And they really busted that myth that wheat in and of itself is not really what the issue is. Again, it could be salt, it could be sugar, it could be fat, it could be anything that's, a sedentary lifestyle. And I think that they really harped on that is like, hey, gluten is not the answer to the next fad diet. And I think all celiacs hate the idea that, gluten is a fad diet right now, and hopefully it will go away very soon. But
yeah, absolutely. It's not necessarily doing us a favour, is it, when we go into a restaurant and we ask, and you sometimes get the impression that, it's only a gluten-free diet, so therefore cross-contamination won't matter. And I guess to people who have chosen to live that way, it won't, but to us it will, and they're kind of doing us a bit of a disservice, I think.
Yeah, huge.
What about the parts per million debate then? Because obviously you're going to have 20 parts per million. We're at 20 parts per million. We just came down to that a couple of years back. Bizarrely, Australia is going up to 20 parts per million. So it's all a little bit confusing potentially, isn't it, about what is safe? What was discussed then on the stage?
I get negative feedback from a lot of my readers on this because I'm very staunch and very happy about the 20 parts per million being appropriate for everyone. And I consistently get readers who I think hate me because I'm on this phase. I'm like, 20 parts per million is safe for most. And they're like, well, I'm one of them where I had something and it made me sick, and I had this and I had this, and 20 parts per million is not accurate. We need 0 parts per million. That's the only way a safe celiac can eat. It's the only way that you can get 0 parts per million, where it's like grown in a lab that has not been touched by any other outside factors, right? And you're eating in your lab suit. Basically, if you're going to have 0 parts per million, you're going to have to fly up in a space shuttle wearing your spacesuit and harvest your own wheat there. And the second that you get out of your spacesuit, it's going to be contaminated just by the universe. When he was talking about, 20 parts per million, he found this minuscule part of the population that were not responding to the 20 parts per million diet that still had issues, like very, very, very small percentage of the population. So it's really about how much of this 20 parts per million per day that you're eating to get to this threshold that's safe for most celiacs. It's hard to debate something that the facts are in front of you, and who's very good about presenting the exact facts on where this research came from. And I think that people want to blame the FDA, and the FDA was actually there, a representative was there. And I think that they're doing all that they can to make us as safe as possible in a wheat-filled world. We need to keep fighting for better testing, more stringent testing, making sure that everyone does test in this new FDA law. But people need to know that 20 parts per million is evidence-based science. And if you do react, maybe there's another issue with you reacting to something else, or maybe you need to be on a different diet.
It sounds as though, 4 days in Chicago, it sounds as though you've got enough to see you through to the next symposium, which is 2 years away in Prague.
Right.
It's a bit of a distance for you to go, I suppose, but
it
sounds like you had a terrific time. You learned lots.
I did. And what's so funny is that, each of us got this giant abstract book, and it was an abstract of every single piece of research that was presented at the symposium, not even during the clinical session or scientific session, but the people who presented their research and were part of the poster sessions, right? So I have an insane amount of studies. I can't even tell you how many there are, but I think maybe in the hundreds. I mean, it's just books after books. I think there's 130 pages of abstracts, and I think there's 2 per page. It's insane. So each one has the background, the objectives, and the methodology, and then the conclusion. So imagine all of us getting this book that has basically 200 scientific conclusions on all parts of celiac disease, from diagnosis to genetics to dermatitis herpetiformis to, the role of social support in celiac disease. So us bloggers got home and were like, that's great. Oh my gosh, I have so much research to pour through. So you're only getting, to quote a typical celiac metaphor, you're getting the tip of the iceberg, right? This is only the tip of the iceberg for the research that we even, received from this symposium. So I can't stress enough how critical something like this is to not only all the other doctors who attended. Thank God my doctor did. I saw her in the crowd. So she can get, the pinnacle of celiac research. But for this research to disseminate down to the media, to the press, to the bloggers, and you've probably seen it. I don't know if you've seen it in the UK, but NPR has been talking a lot about busting the wheat belly myth, because they picked it up from a symposium research article. And this is really, you're probably going to see this research come out in the next couple months, and it's just going to keep coming and keep coming, because it's almost an overwhelming amount of amazing peer-reviewed scientific research that's coming out on celiac disease.
Is Prague something you're likely to be getting to, or is it going to be Paris 4 years after that? What do you reckon, Erica?
I really would love to be in Paris. I actually tweeted that. I'm like, do you think I could earn enough money from then until now to go to Paris? But, my friends who traveled abroad in college, they love Prague. And it's such an American-friendly, tourist-friendly place to go to. And I think that I just had such a great time at this one that it will be hard for me to not attend. For me to not be there live tweeting for everyone, I think will be hard for me. So I guess we'll see in the next couple of years if I make it to a truly international ICDS. Okay.
And it sounds as though a lot of the 4 days was valuable because of the people you were meeting outside those sessions, and perhaps having your gluten-free breakfast with, or meeting up afterwards either in the bar or discovering and exploring the fantastic city that is Chicago, and then swapping notes and ideas and just building contacts with people around the world.
Yeah, I really encourage especially newbies to go to expos, events, support groups. I mean, maybe not as intense as the symposium, because a lot of the research was over my head, even for someone who, was almost majoring in biology, who took a lot of genetics courses. Some of them was a bit intense, but I would suggest for anyone who is diagnosed to attend an event where it's only gluten-free people around, because this disease is often socially isolating. It's very empowering to know that you're not alone and that there's many, many people out there that are just like you. I think that's huge for anyone. So if it's not the symposium, maybe it's an expo, maybe it's a support group, maybe it's another event, but definitely to get it out there and to spread this information that, there's great things on the horizon for people with celiac, and that we're not alone in this, that there's many, many people who are working for a better life for all of us.
Well, we're trying to do our little bit on our podcast, the G3 radio show, and obviously you are as well. So how can people follow you then, Erica, and read your write-ups from the symposium and follow you on Twitter?
So my Twitter handle is Celiac Beast. My website is celiacandthebeast.com, like Beauty and the Beast, but with celiac disease instead. And I also do a lot of Instagramming, which is really the new hot thing. And I'm at Celiac and the Beast on there. So you can follow me anywhere and everywhere. And I'd love to answer questions about the forum. And give me a bit of time to pour through the 140-page research abstract. But hopefully I will be posting much more information from the symposium soon.
And that sounds great. And just a reminder, obviously, because as you can tell from Erica's accent, we're speaking to her from Arizona. So celiac, in the case of her Twitter name and website name, is the American spelling of celiac. I'm not entirely sure why you dropped the O, but there you are. It does get in the way a little bit, doesn't it? But and certainly when you're doing hashtags on Twitter and having to include both of those spellings, but that's the reason. And we look forward to welcoming you to to the UK soon, I hope, and so you can see what how we're doing over here with the fantastic range of foods that we have in our supermarkets and the understanding with our health service, which is, I think, from my personal experience, pretty good.
I've heard many fantastic things. I'm very excited to one day be a part of your community over there.